Hi everyone, welcome to this SDC talk. Today Selva and myself will talk about enabling generic copy offload in Linux kernel on top of NVMe copy interface. First thing first, the work that we are going to elaborate here is under discussion, primarily in the kernel mailing list. So it is possible that what gets finalized in due course is somewhat different from what we are describing in this talk today. So good to keep an eye on the kernel mailing list. The second thing to be cleared here is that the copy offload topic has got a lot of history in the standard bodies as well as in the system software. So many things that we are talking about today is actually a result of community efforts scattered over multiple years. And on the plumbing that we have out there in the mailing list, the feedback and ideas have come from many developers. So this is the agenda of the talk. So the talk is a combination of historical and current work. At high level, we can categorize this into few parts. We start by looking at the pain points and improvement points around copy operation. We clearly segregate all the remedial efforts into two categories. First one is what system software can do on its own, and what it can do with the help of the storage device. That would be the second category. And to that end, we briefly cover the copy offload interface of SCSI that has been around since long. And then we move to the NVMe copy interface that recently made its way into 2.0 spec. And in the end, we elaborate the kernel support scheme that is shaping up over this NVMe copy interface. Now, if we look at the copy operation, it's classically been a composite operation. Mix of two distinct operations. First one is to read the data from source, and the second operation here is to write that data to the destination. And that is indeed the most sure shot way to get this done, because read and write are fundamental operations and generally supported by all type of backends, storage or otherwise. As you know, that copy can be tried from storage to network also. So we have to take that as well into the account. And that said, so this way of doing the copy brings some overheads too. And those overheads do not seem necessary, particularly when the source and destination of the copy operation is the same underlying device. So here we have a figure right hand side, which shows a primitive copy from one location of the device to another location on the same device. So data moves from the device to the kernel buffer. It could be a page cache, for example. And generally, this movement is done by DMA. And then from the kernel buffer, this moves up to the application buffer. That is the read part of the copy. Now, post that, the write part of the copy starts. Then the data starts traveling back to the kernel buffer, and then it goes down to the disk location, again via DMA. So this is essentially a round trip operation. And to carry out this operation, host CPU gets involved, DRAM gets involved, and something else in the DRAM may get evicted in the process of making room for data. It depends on the volume of the data, basically, which is getting copied. And the third thing here is that apart from CPU and DRAM, the DMA also gets involved. And all that seems avoidable because the data could have moved from location 1 to location 2 without ever getting outside of the storage device. Now, this round trip, it only gets worse over fabrics. When application issuing the copy gets far from the storage, at that point of time, a lot of movement would be happening over the wire, over the network. It can saturate the network and it can break the data locality. So here we take a step back and look at the things that Linux provides to the application to mitigate the cost of the copy. Application can do a couple of things. So it can start by employing the overlap processing by using the async programming. So it can queue a bunch of read and write operation, especially on a parallel storage which has multiple on-device queues and processor. This may lead to better throughput. However, this is still a composite operation model. Another way to optimize the copy is to eliminate the copy between kernel and user space part. So we have a bunch of system calls which allow to do the in-kernel copy, like send file, splice, and copy file range. The key thing to note here, if we look at the prototype of all these APIs, none of these APIs expects user space to pass the buffer pointers. Send file is the oldest of this bunch. It copies from one file to other. Although the original use case was to copy from regular file to a socket. And yeah, this is basically one of the example of heterogeneous backend, as I mentioned before. Then we have splice. So with the splice, one file descriptor has to be a pipe, which is, for the lack of a better word, it's a fancy name for in-kernel buffer. So it turns out to be a two-step process. The step one is to read the file, let's say file A, to a pipe, and this is called splice in operation. And the step two is to use that pipe to write to the file B, and that would be splice out operation. At this point, send file internally, I mean inside the kernel, it uses the same infra that was added with the splice. And then we have this third API, which is called copy file range to do the in-kernel copy. Some file system use this copy file range as an interface to infuse copy advancements. For example, NFS and CIFS, they implement the server-side copy using this interface. Another method for optimizing the copy operation is possible when there is higher level abstraction created over raw data blocks. So typically the file systems would be the best example of a higher level abstraction. It is also possible by the volume manager. Yes, but in case of file system, so we have regular files which overlay a file address space on top of the block address space using some kind of metadata. So logical copy is about sharing the data blocks across multiple files. So we have this figure over here in the right hand side. It shows a file A, which has two data blocks, D1 and D2, and it has one inode. Now, when we make copy of this file into other file, which is file B, so file B is made to point to the same data block which belong to file A. At some later point of time, if such shared data block is modified, the change is kept private to the file being written. So in this example, the D1, when it gets modified, it becomes D1 dash, and it got created when we try to modify the file B. So this is essentially delaying the copy by applying copy on write technique. So some file systems like ButterFS, OCFS, and XFS do implement this. More commonly, it is known as a reflink feature. Application can invoke the ref link or the logical copy by using ioctl, which is called fi clone or fi clone range. We have this the well-known CP program, which gives this tunable option ref link equal to always to do the logical copy. After seeing a couple of the approaches towards shortening the copy path, so essentially we saw the approach of pushing the copy away from application to the kernel or to a system software. Now the natural extension of the scheme is to push the copy further down to the storage itself. So with the copy offload, the storage device provides a separate copy interface. It's a distinct interface like read and write, an additional one. So with the in-kernel copy, we saw user application doing away with read and write buffers, but kernel continued to manage the DRAM buffers, and internally it did read and write operations. And since host buffer were involved, DMA2 was also involved. With the in-device copy, kernel 2 can do away with those buffers and read-write operations, and it can shift to use the dedicated copy interface coming from the storage device itself. It is to be noted that host buffers are not involved, so DMA2 also doesn't come into the scene. With this new interface, the responsibilities shift considerably. Now host will mostly do the control plane operations. It needs to send the commands which will specify the locations involved in the copy operation, while device gets to do the actual copy, all within itself. So the movement outside the storage reduced significantly, because what travels across the network is mostly the commands and not the actual data that is under the copy operation. So SCSI introduced this kind of copy offload interface long back. It covered various possible scenarios for copy offload. But yeah, we try to keep it overly simple in this talk and look at two main variants. The first one is extended copy. It is also referred as XCopy. So many choices with the XCopy, we get many choices with respect to what could be the source and what could be the destination of copy. So copy is can be specified within a LUN. It could be across LUNs on the same array, and sometimes across LUNs on the different array as well. So block ranges describing the copy operations, they are packed into the extended copy command, and this is sent either to the source LUN or to the destination LUN. The second method is called tokenized copy offload. It's also known as ODX, offloaded data transfer. So in this method, host sends a SCSI command called populate token to the storage array. On receiving this command, the array is going to generate a token and stays all the relevant data at that particular moment for a future copy operation. The token it's a little heavy structure. It's a 512 byte opaque structure internally used by the storage array to identify the data that it stages for point-in-time copy. Now, host is going to send one more command to get this token that array has generated. And once the host gets such token, it can pass that token to another host. So the second host, in this example, it is shown by, in this figure, it is shown by the server 2. It is going to issue another command called write using token. And in that command, it is going to tell a different location for the data represented by this particular token. Now, when the array receives this command, it copies the staged source data to the destination location. And that's how the copy operation takes place using the tokenized method. Now we look at the attempts which were made in the kernel to wire up the Xcopy based copy offload. So there have been multiple attempts, but we do not have it upstream. So Martin, who is the SCSI maintainer, he proposed the initial support, and later Mikuláš added more things to that. Interface-wise, there was a new ioctl that allowed copying blocks between a single source range and single destination range. The ioctl traveled to the block layer, and after that, it got divided into two operations: copy read and copy write. So this kind of decomposition of the copy into read and write, it was primarily done to support kernel implemented virtual block devices, which, to make the matter complicated, could be stacked on top of one another. So these virtual devices, they are provided by another subsystem called device mapper, which resides within the block subsystem. So what happens is that at some point when both this copy read and copy write operation, they travel down and reach to the SCSI driver intact, the SCSI driver is going to combine these to form the Xcopy command and send that to the underlying device. In any of if any of the copy read and or copy write operation, if it gets split during the travel from the block layer to SCSI driver, the operation is marked failed. And that kind of failure can happen depending on how the virtual device has been composed. So eventually this couldn't go in because of a bunch of reasons that Martin has already outlined in his document, Here Be Dragons. I have put a link of the document over here. So even though the device mapper support was made to work, it was subject to conditions. That is no split. And in the real world, those failures and scenarios were more common than the successful ones. Now, fast forward to 2020 and 21, we have a brand new copy offload interface, and this time into NVMe. So NVMe 2.0, it brought a good deal of refactoring in the spec. In NVMe command set, now we have this new feature called copy command. Fred Knight, who is the author of the feature, he had originally put it as simple copy. The simplicity is in relation to Xcopy, which turned out to be a complex command, primarily because Xcopy had multitude of options: copy within LUN, across LUNs, could be intra-storage array and inter-storage array too. While in contrast to that, NVMe copy, in the NVMe copy, the scope of copy is limited to within the single namespace, which is equivalent to SCSI LUN. So it's a copy within a LUN. And so the NVMe copy command allows hosts to copy the data from one or multiple source block ranges to single destination range. We have the figure over here, which shows the example of such copy operation. There are three source ranges, each one denoted by a starting LBA and number of blocks. And there is a destination LBA, single destination LBA 800, along with the count of the source ranges, which is 3 in this case. So this is how the command is specified. And when the command is done, controller is going to post a completion queue entry telling the status of the command. If due to some reason command fails, the number of the lowest source range that couldn't be copied is returned to the host. In the figure here, range entry 0 and 2 are copied, while range entry 1 failed. So the value 1 is returned as a failure to the host. And then host can take whatever corrective actions it may deem fit. The spec also defines a couple of limits with the copy command. So we have the limit called MSRC, max limit on the number of the source ranges. In this example here, the count is 3, and this will be checked against the MSRC. Another limit is MSSRL. So this is a limit on the maximum length of the single source range. We have 3 source ranges over here. And if any of the 3 range in this example, it cannot describe a length that is larger than MSSRL. The third limit is MCL, which is the limit on the length of the entire copy operation. If a host issues a copy command which violates any of these 3 limits, the command is aborted with a proper error status. So now we look at why now. So the advent of the NVMe copy interface is happening much after the advent of the SCSI copy interface, and the underlying technology landscape, it has seen many changes, especially in the last 3-4 years. So if in the current scenario, the in-device copy has become more relevant because of a host of reasons. First one is that we have got larger drives, and that is going to show up as QLC picks more steam. The second thing is that zone abstraction has made its way into NVMe. We are also seeing the adoption of NVMe as a NVMe as a storage protocol, and NVMe over Fabrics as a networked protocol. I mean that the overall adoption has increased. The disaggregated setups separating storage nodes from the compute ones are more common than before. And a lot has been highlighted on performance gap between the storage and CPU. So while the storage is getting larger, and it is also able to complete the operation with the lower latency now, we see that the CPU performance has stopped increasing in the same way it used to increase. So the clock frequencies of the CPU stopped increasing post the end of the Dennard scaling. Now programs can get faster only if they are leveraging the multiple cores. It's no longer automatic, as automatic as it used to be. And for the multiple cores too, we have got Moore's law, which is slowly fading. So talking about the specific use cases for the NVMe copy command, we have got, as I mentioned, we have got Zone software, which anyway has to do the garbage collection, moving around data within the same namespace. So copy operation can help keeping all that movement local to the device rather than outside of it. And the log structured file systems and databases, they anyway do the compactions and the garbage collection like stuff, whether the underlying device is GNS or not. So it can be useful for conventional namespaces too. And people have talked about the virtualization use cases before. Now, in the last part of this talk, we speak of the upstream efforts towards enabling the NVMe copy command in the Linux kernel. So we have this big picture, which is actually the simplified IO stack, primarily to get a bird's eye view of all what all elements we are constructing to make the generic copy offload over NVMe copy command. So at the bottommost place, we have the NVMe SSD supporting the copy command. We may also have the SSD without the copy command, but let's talk about that in a while. Now we move up to the NVMe driver. While driver is going to detect the presence of the copy support and deals with all the details of the copy command stack, it also has to work with the block layer to abstract all those details and create a block generic copy command. The block generic copy command is denoted by the operation code, which is shown as request op underscore copy here. It is a cardinal function of the block layer to present the protocol agnostic copy operation to the components above it. So it is going to abstract all the copy related limits that we discussed before, and it may even impose the kernel defined limits. Essentially, it is going to make it possible to do the larger copy operation than what is supported by the device. The copy emulation block in this figure is for the case when the underlying device does not support the offload natively. In that case, the copy is emulated by combining the read and write operation. So once we have the block generic copy command infra in the block layer, it can be used by other in-kernel users such as file systems, or in this figure we have shown the DMK copy D, which is a DM generic infra. Now the last step is to create the user interface, and there are a couple of choices for that. The interface can be sync or it can be asynchronous. For the asynchronous one, we are plumbing this into IURing and AIO. It is pretty extensible via in new opcode in the IURing. We do not really require syscall there. While for the sync one, one can try extending a existing system call, and if it doesn't work, we go about introducing a new one. But in this case, we see that because NVMe copy is a multi-source and single destination semantics, we do not find a good match in the existing system calls. So therefore, we introduce a new IOCTL for the copy operation. Now I will hand it off to Selva, who will go into the specifics and zoom in on all these different but connected element of the scheme.
Hello everyone, I'm Selva. Let me continue from where Kanchan left, and let us see in more detail about the components of copy offload. Existing system call interfaces like copy file range, synfile do not accept more than one source location. While copy command is optimized to receive more than one source ranges, lack of an interface that can accept more than one source range hinders the ability to fully utilize the copy command. A new IOCTL block copy is introduced to address this. It accepts pointer to a new structure, copy range, shown in the right of the slide. Firstly, source range need two things. One is source offset and another is the length. These two things are clubbed together to form range entry structure. Array of source ranges are encapsulated inside copy range structure along with destination offset injectors and number of range field representing the number of elements in the array. One can never be more safe while defining a new IOCTL interface. To accommodate any future requirements, reserve field is added to this structure. To begin with, adding a new IOCTL makes sense. But for most of the real-world configuration, having a synchronous interface will limit the maximum performance. Copy command support can be added to the new and the exciting IOUring asynchronous interface, and also for the time-tested Linux AIO interface. Copy file range will be a good candidate for adding copy offload support for files. Let us see an example where we want to copy three source ranges from location 0, 16, 32, each of length 8 to the destination location of 64. Range entry array with 3 elements is defined. Source range and length values are manipulated in the array. And in the copy range structure, destination offset is set as 64 and number of ranges is set as 3. Pointer to the range entry array is set in the range list member of the copy range structure. Then Block copy actual with the pointer to the copy range structure is called to submit the copy command. On success, 0 is written. All the values are in sector as we are directly dealing with the block device. Let us move on to see the internals of block layer. Block layer and the device driver work together to understand the payload passed in the I/O. Block layer exposes protocol agnostic upload request OP copy to upper layer, including file systems. Based on the caller, synchronous or asynchronous completion can be provided. Device limits are expressed in LBAs. Depending on the device format, LBA size can be represented in sectors or 4K or something else. To make things standardized for all the user, device limits are abstracted into sectors and are added to request queue limits. Totally, 4 new entries are added to the block device queue sysfs to expose the limit to the user space. Maximum copy NR range entry represents the maximum number of source ranges a single copy command can accommodate. Maximum copy range sector entry represents the maximum number of maximum length of a single source range entry. Maximum copy sector entry represents the maximum length of the summation of all source range entries in the single command. If maximum copy sector is equal to 0, then it means the device doesn't support copy. All the above mentioned entries are read-only entries. Kernel also provide copy offload sysfs entry to allow users to enable or disable copy offload support. This is a read-write sysfs entry. 1 represents that copy offload is enabled and the command is submitted to the device via copy offload. 0 represents that copy offload is disabled and any copy submitted to the device will be completed using emulation. Let us see what copy emulation is. When underlying device doesn't support copy or switch is turned off, copy can be emulated by using read and write operation. Copy emulation is done by reading source ranges into kernel buffer and writing down to the device. Kernel tries to allocate overall buffer to read the ranges into the kernel. If the requested buffer is not available, then the buffer size is reduced into half and reduced till allocation becomes successful. Some of the caller may have a dedicated jobs or daemon to complete read and write. They can have a larger buffer already reserved for them beforehand. They can check for the copy support and choose not to use copy emulation and go with their native implementation. Let us see the flow of the copy command. User creates a payload as an array of source ranges in the structure range entry format and submit copy block copy IACL. Once the control switches to kernel, payload is copied from user space to kernel space. Let us see what happens in the block layer. The user payload is checked for validity in the block layer. It is possible for a user to be sending a copy larger than device imposed limits. If copy is larger than the device limits, then block layer handles copy by splitting and sending multiple IOs down based on the device limit. For each IOs, a corresponding BIO is allocated. Source ranges are attached as payload and with length adjusted destination as BIO offset. Newly introduced request OP copy opcode is set. Since we have already handled the device limit while forming the BIO, so there will be no need for merging and splitting. Request OP merge flag is set to pass the IO down to the device untouched. Copy on a partition device is handled by adjusting the source offset in the payload and destination offset related to the device start. BIOS are created and submitted until the payload is over. These BIOS travel independent to each other and are encapsulated as a request and reach as the environment driver layer. Request OP opcode is created to be treated like a write operation. For copy on the zone device, zone write lock is acquired to honor zone write pointer restrictions. Now let's see what NVMe layer does. Once NVMe driver receives a request with request OP opcode, it reads the payload and does the necessary sector to LBA conversion. Finally, a NVMe copy command is formed and dispatched to the device. DMKCopd is part of a large device mapper infra. It provides the ability to copy a range of sectors from one source location to one or more destination. Different DM targets like DM snapshot, DM clone, DM zone uses DMKCopd to copy continuous or selective ranges in their targets. It is a good place to leverage copy command. DMKCopyD maintains the list of jobs for allocating pages for submission and completion of I/O and for callback. We add a new job to utilize copy offload if available. Copy job is called before any pages are allocated for the current I/O. Copy support of the underlying device is checked. If both source and destination device fall within the same namespace and the device supports copy, then copy offload is used to complete the operation. For destination that doesn't support copy, life goes on as usual. Existing DM I/O infra can be used to complete those jobs. DM clone target creates one-to-one copy of existing read-only source device to a writable destination device. Clone device is mountable and writable immediately once it is created. User can start issuing I/O and need not to wait for the complete device to be cloned. Copying of source to destination happens in the background in parallel with the user I/O. This background copying process is called as hydration. DM clone employs DMKCopyD to copy portion of I/O region from source to destination device. DMKCopyD uses device bandwidth. By using copy command support in KCopyD, bandwidth is optimized to only send control information and the I/O operation is offloaded to the device. For testing the use case, a simple DM clone setup is created on top of 3 partitions on an NVMe device. One partition acts as a source, one acts as a destination, and one acts as a metadata device. When hydration is triggered, copy offload kicks in. Device Mapper is a kernel framework that provides advanced logical volume management capability in Linux. It forms the fundamental of software RAID. Device Mapper subsystem creates a virtual block device on top of a real one. It implements many functionality that are not supported by the underlying device, like concatenation, striping, encryption, snapshot, etc. It is completely possible for a user to stack a virtual device on top of another virtual device. Device Mapper remap IOs on virtual device depending on the DM target policy. Read or write BIOS can be split while traveling down. In some DM targets, even data is changed like in DM script. With large number of device mapper policies differing east to west from each other, it is extremely difficult to define semantics of copy operation on each individual device mapper. When we issue a copy offload to a virtual device, it may look like we are issuing an I/O to a single device, but inside, it can be mapped to multiple devices. As NVMe simple copy is within the namespace as of now, it is not possible to support those device DM setups. Some device mapper has split logic to implement DM target policy. As read and write operations are naturally split, it is easy to propagate copy when copy becomes composite operation with read and write. Copy can be scattered as multiple read and write at block layer and gathered at NVMe layer to finally send NVMe command to the copy. Composite copy provides the challenge that NVMe driver needs to wait till all the scattered read-write operation to be received at NVMe driver level. This may not be good for latency. What we described till now, this point, is towards adding the initial support for copy offload. There are more things on the radar. Device mapper is the biggest challenge that need to be solved to add copy offload support in Linux. With community inputs, we can either decide to add copy offload support to some of the device mappers or get the consensus from the community to move ahead without device mapper support. I/O ring is expanding rapidly and it is under constant development. Adding an asynchronous copy command via I/O ring would be the logically next step to make the interface more useful. With constant usage, files in the device become more fragmented, and any further allocation becomes slow. File system requires garbage collection to erase invalid blocks and move valid blocks around. Copy offload can be utilized for this task to offload portion of the file system load to the device. Considering the network traffic in the data centers, adding a copy offload support over fabrics could also be considered. Hope you all enjoyed this session on copy offload. Looking forward to answer your questions on Slack channel. Thank you very much.